Welcome to Top 10 USA, home of the Rocket Platform. Please follow our installation procedures and be sure to use appropriate ESD standards and techniques throughout the installation process. If these procedures are not followed appropriately, damage to your SAN as well as data loss may occur. If your machine is covered under the Rocket Plus subscription and you have any questions or concerns, please open a ticket through the Rocket Platform customer portal. Thank you for purchasing your pre-configured Dell EqualLogic SAN from the Rocket Platform. This instructional is to help you with the installation of your new array. With the purchase of the pre-configured system, you are also provided with a rack mount kit designed for your system. Take the kit and insert it into the desired rack position. Once the rails have been secured, locate the chassis. The chassis will have the power supplies and control modules already installed into the rear of the chassis. Insert the chassis into the rack where you have just installed the rails. Around 50% of the way into the slot, the rails will catch on a rail locking mechanism. On each side of the rail kit, you will see little blue tabs. Pull those blue tabs towards the front of the chassis while pushing the chassis back into the rack. When the chassis is nearly seated all the way, you will need to secure the top cover of the chassis to the rack. Push back on the top cover of the array while pulling back on the chassis. Now take the screws provided and screw the top cover to the rack. Once the top cover is secured to the rack, pull the drawer out until all the drive bays are easily accessible. The drives are left out of the array due to their fragile nature. You will need to now insert the drives into their drive bays. To insert a drive into its driveway, open up the arm of the tray completely. Once the arm of the drive is completely open, insert the drive into its drive bay. When inserted around 90% of the way, the arm on the drive will begin to catch in its slot. Once the arm of the tray begins to catch in its slot, push the arm of the tray downwards until you hear or see the black tab click into place. Repeat this process until all drives have been inserted into the array. Now that all drives have been inserted into the array, you will now want to reseat the channel control cards. The channel control cards control the flow of traffic between the control modules of the array and the disks in the disk slots. It is recommended that you reseat the control cards in order to ensure a good connection. In order to reseat the control card, lift up on the black tab on each side of the channel control card. Once these tabs have extended fully, you should be free to pull the channel control card straight up out of the slot. Pull the control card halfway out of the slot before reinserting it into its slot. Around 90% of the way into the slot, the black tabs will begin to catch into their slots. Depress on these black tabs, and the channel control card will seat the rest of the way. Repeat this process on the alternate channel control card. Now that the channel control cards have been reseated, you will now need to seat the array in the rack properly. Push the array back all the way. Once the chassis is inserted in the rack fully, take the Dell issued key and turn the lock on the faceplate in a clockwise direction. Next to the lock, you will see a little black tab. Lift up on the black tab and the faceplate locking mechanism will release, allowing you to remove the faceplate. With the faceplate removed, take a flathead screwdriver and turn the flathead screws on each side of the front of the chassis in a clockwise direction. These screws control a bar for the locking mechanism for the rails. Once you have locked the array in place, head to the rear of the array. From the rear of the array, you will see the power supplies and the control modules in their slots. It is recommended that you reseat the components in the rear before inserting any of the cables into the array, to ensure good connection between the rear parts and the chassis. Begin with the control modules. To reseat the control module, push the two black tabs on the control module outward while pulling the black levers towards you. Once these black levers have opened fully, you should be free to move the control module in its slot. Pull the controller halfway out of the slot before inserting it back into the array. Around 90% of the way, the black levers will catch into their slots. Depress on the black levers until you see or hear the black tabs click into place. Once clicked in place, attempt to pull the control module out without releasing the locking mechanism. If the control module stays in its place, it has been properly seated. If the control module moves around in its place, it has not been properly seated and will need to be reseated. Repeat this process on the alternate control module. You will now need to reseat the power supplies. In order to reseat the power supply, push the two black tabs on the metal bar inward while pulling outwards on the metal bar. Once the metal bar is extended fully, you should be free to move the power supply around in a slot. Pull the power supply around halfway out of the slot before inserting it back into the array. Around 90% of the way into the array, the metal bar on the power supply will begin to catch in its slot. Once the bar begins to catch in its slot, push the metal bar towards the chassis until you see or hear the black tabs click into place. Once clicked in place, pull on the metal bar without releasing the locking mechanism. If the power supply stays in its slot, it has been properly seated. If the power supply moves around in the slot, it has not been properly seated and will need to be reseated. Repeat this process on the remaining two power supplies. Now that all of the components have been inserted and reseated in the array, you'll now need to insert the cables. Begin with the networking cables. Insert the networking cables into the controllers according to how you have configured your network. Once the networking cables have been inserted, you will then need to insert the power supply cables. Now that all the cables have been inserted into the array, return to the front of the array. From the front of the array, you will need to lift up on the plastic tab covering the power button and then depress on the power button. The array will begin to boot. Once the array has begun to boot, cover the array with the faceplate. In order to cover the array with the faceplate, you will need to slide the faceplate into the right-hand side from the left. Once the right-hand side is secured in its slots, push straight back on the faceplate until you see or hear the black tab click into place. Once the black tab is clicked into place, take the Dell issued key and turn the lock in a counterclockwise direction. You will now need to wait for your array to boot. The array will take around 15 to 20 minutes before completing the boot process. Head to the rear of the array and wait for the array to finish booting. When the boot process is completed, the controllers in the array will be in the active and secondary states. When the controllers are in the active and secondary states, they will display certain indicator lights. The controllers have 3 indicator lights attached: the PWR, ERR, and ACCT lights. The PWR light indicates whether or not the control module is receiving power. The ERR lights indicate when there is an issue during the boot process on the control module. The ACCT light indicates the activity status on the control module. When the controller is in the active state, the indicator lights on the controller will have a power light lit up green, and the ACCT light lit up green as well. When the controller is in the secondary state, the indicator lights on the controller will have the power light lit up as green, and the ACCT light lit up as amber. When the array has finished its boot process, take the null modem serial cable provided and plug it into the serial port on the active control module. On your computer that has the other end of the serial cable plugged in, open up PuTTY or a similar SSH/serial client. Select the serial option and set the baud rate to 9600. Open up the connection, then hit enter. After hitting enter, you will see a login prompt. The default username for the array is grpadmin with a default password of grpadmin. Once logged in, you will be prompted to configure the networking settings of the array. Type Y, then hit enter. You will be asked if you wish to proceed. Type yes, then hit enter to begin configuring the network settings. Your first selection will be to set the member name. This name is to be set as the unique name for the particular array. After inputting the member name, you will be prompted to select the first port on the member to activate. Depending on the control module, the options will range from ETH0 to ETH3. If you simply hit enter, the script will automatically select ETH0. After selecting the port, you must then set the IP address. This IP address will be used as the specific IP address for the port you just selected. Once you have set the IP address, you will then need to set the network mask. This mask determines which network range the IP address will be set upon. Once the net mask has been set, you will then set the default gateway. Once this information has been established, the array will activate the port according to the settings you just input. Once the port has become active, the array will need to be assigned to a group. If you already have an EqualLogic group and wish for this member to join that group, input the name of the group followed by the group IP address. Once the connection to the group you wish to join has been established, you will be prompted to enter the member management password. This password is specific to allowing the addition of new members to the group. Once input, the member will join the group. If you do not have a group to join the member to, or simply wish to create a new group, input the desired name of the group followed by the desired group IP address. The group IP address is a virtual address used to cluster members into a group and does not have a designated port to reside on. After inputting the data, the array will attempt to search for the group using the parameters you had just set. Once the array has failed to find the group, you will be asked if you wish to create a new group. Type yes, then hit enter to continue. Next, you will be prompted if you would like to use the information you had entered previously. If you had entered the information correct the first time, simply type yes, then hit enter. If you had input any of the information incorrectly, type no, then hit enter. Then you will restart the group configuration segment. After creating the new group, you will then set the member management password. This password is specifically set to allow other arrays to configure to the group. You will need to enter the password identically twice congruently for the password to be accepted as the new password. After the member management password has been set, you will then set the password for the default account. This will change the default password for the GRP admin account. As with the member management password, the password must be input identically twice congruently in order for the password change to be accepted. Once the GRP admin password has changed, the member will begin to come online with the new group. Wait approximately 10 minutes, then open up your preferred browser. In the address bar of the browser, input the group IP. Once you see a login prompt, enter the login credentials for the GRP admin account. Now that you are logged into the group manager, you will need to set the specific RAID that you would like applied to the member, and the storage pool for the member to belong to. First, expand on the members tree and select the member you had just installed. Once selected, a window will appear asking if you would like to configure the RAID for the array. Select the option Yes to continue, and a new window will appear. From the first tab of the new window, you will be able to alter the name of the member and select a storage pool for the member to belong to. A storage pool is a set of arrays that span data related to the pool across the arrays. This feature allows you to have multiple arrays in group for simple management, while allowing you to determine what information is shared between which arrays. Arrays in the same group will not span data with other members if they are not within the same storage pool. The default storage pool will automatically be selected whenever configuring the RAID on a new member. Select the storage pool you wish this array to join. Note that the array can be moved from storage pool to storage pool as long as there is enough free space on the remaining members of the pool to relieve the data off of the member prior to removing the member into the new pool. After selecting the storage pool, you will click Next to continue. Select the RAID policy you wish to have configured for this array. After selecting the RAID policy, there will be an option for RAID accessibility. You can choose to have the data accessible immediately or tell the array to wait until the RAID is verified before allowing access to the storage. Select the option based upon personal preference, then select Next to continue. In this final tab, you will be shown a summary of the configuration you had just set. Select Finish to finalize the options and initialize the RAID. Now that the RAID is initializing, you will need to configure the rest of the ports on the new member. Navigate to the Networks tab. In this tab, you will see a network configuration for this particular array. The port you had configured during the initial configuration will show up with the specific settings assigned during the initial configuration, while the other ports will be grayed out with no information for either the IP or net mask. Double-click on one of the grayed out ports and a window will appear. Input the desired IP address and net mask, then select the option Enable Interface. Select OK to enact the changes on the port. The port will now activate with the settings applied. Repeat this process until all ports are now active. If you chose to wait for the verification of the RAID before allowing accessibility, you must wait for your RAID to verify before using the array. If you chose to allow accessibility immediately, you may now begin using the array. If any issues arise during the installation process or you have any questions or concerns, please contact us directly. Thank you for choosing the Rocket Platform, the evolution of hardware maintenance.
Thanks for watching. This has been another video by the Top 10 USA Video Production Team. We look forward to sharing more content with you going forward, so please check out our YouTube channel and please subscribe so that you get notified whenever we release a new piece of content.